Hey there, welcome to episode 12 of Screen Facts with Jason Davis, and joining me once again on the podcast is my cousin Warren Sidosky.
Hi there.
We are going to talk about a movie today that you had mentioned is one of your all-time favorites.
Oh, I love this movie. I mean, I could watch it. I've probably watched it 20 times since it's come out, and I could watch it again and again.
I really enjoyed watching this again. So the movie we're going to talk about is Big. Released June 3rd, 1988. You know, we keep talking about all these movies from the 80s. They hold up really, really well.
It seems like yesterday.
Yeah, it really does. And I think that the reason they hold up so well is because they're so well written. You know, a lot of the movies that come out nowadays, it seems like there's a lot of fluff, a lot of special effects, and not a lot of focus on the script.
Right.
And, you know, granted, this is a comedy. It's not, you know, a big event film, but still, it holds up as long as it has and is still very enjoyable and fun because it's just very well written. It's written by Gary Ross, who also wrote Seabiscuit and The Hunger Games, among others. And Steven Spielberg's sister, Anne, was the co-writer on this movie. Directed by Penny Marshall, who, by the way, became the first female director to ever direct a movie that grossed more than $100 million at the box office thanks to the success of this film. Well, the film stars Tom Hanks, Elizabeth Perkins, and Robert Loggia.
So the filming took place in August through October of 1987, and a lot of the scenes at Josh's house were shot in Cliffside Park, New Jersey. And you can actually see, if you're paying attention, the George Washington Bridge in the background. The film had an estimated budget of $18 million, and it grossed just under $115 million in the U.S. and over $151 million worldwide.
You got to remember, too, that it's a comedy, one, and two, you know, this is $1988 we're talking
Right.
about. If you adjusted for inflation now, that would be a pretty successful comedy.
Exactly.
It was actually nominated for a couple of Oscars. Best Screenplay, written directly for the screen, and Tom Hanks, of course, was nominated for Best Actor. I had to look it up because I couldn't remember. He lost the Oscar to Dustin Hoffman for his portrayal in Rain Man. Now, that's kind of a no-brainer. You
Right.
know? But he did win the Best Actor in a Comedy Golden Globe.
Of course.
Tom Hanks. So
yeah, I guess if there was a comedy award in the Oscars, it might have gone to him. But
definitely.
No, I don't think too many comedies win Oscars in the history.
Yeah, that's true. I think the first one that comes to mind always is Marissa Tomei for My Cousin Vinny. She
Sure.
won for that.
Of course.
But yeah, you know, this is not as showy of a role as what Dustin Hoffman did in Rain Man. However, I got to say this. Initially, when I went to watch this movie again and I remembered that he was nominated for the Oscar, you know, I remember thinking, you know, he's really good in this. But Oscar-worthy? I don't know.
Yeah.
And then I got to tell you, when I watched this movie, I was like, wow, I get it now.
Uh-huh.
You know, he really embodies a 12-year-old. And it's not just how he talks, but even subtle things in his body language. There's a scene in the movie where they're looking for the Zoltar machine.
Mm-hmm.
They go to a store that sells video games or rents out video games or whatever. And they leave the store after they don't find the Zoltar machine. And they're running across the street, he and his friend. And just the way Tom Hanks runs across the street,
Right.
He runs like a 12-year-old. It's
Exactly.
it's really great. And there's a couple of ways that he prepared to play a 12-year-old. First off, he met the young version of himself, David Moscow, the actor. He studied videotapes of him to see how he behaved and how he spoke. And Penny Marshall also helped him out with his portrayal. She filmed each of the grown-up scenes with the younger counterpart, David Moscow, playing Tom Hanks's part. And then Tom Hanks would copy David Moscow's behavior.
Brilliant.
Watching that. Yeah, that's really cool, right?
Yep. What really hit home and what I loved about this movie was just the thought of experiencing a grown-up world through the eyes of a 12-year-old boy. You know, when you think about it, when you're 12 years old, I don't know about 12-year-olds today, they're a little bit more sophisticated than we were when, you know, we were 12 years old.
Let me just jump in really quick. I'm glad you mentioned that. We're watching the movie the other night with Tommy, who's almost 14. He'll be 14 later this month. And he actually said, wow, he's really kind of babyish for a 12-year-old. and you know what? That's a very interesting observation from a teenager nowadays, because back in the 80s, you know, we didn't have all the stuff that kids have today. And we joke about it as older people, you know, oh, we had it so good. And the truth is we did. I mean, there's a scene in the movie where there's two kids playing in a pile of leaves, just throwing the leaves up. And that's like a good time.
Uh-huh.
Like, you're not going to see kids doing that nowadays, unless there's an app.
Right, exactly. And the other fun thing about it is you could see everything is taken so literal.
Yeah.
So, and that double entendre that's played off because, you've got this 12-year-old kid interacting with these grown-ups, and what seems so innocent to the 12-year-old kind of gets taken in a different context by the grown-ups. So, it really plays out well throughout the movie.
Robert Loggia said that the day that they filmed the famous keyboard scene, he and Tom Hanks noticed that they had doubles dressed like them that were there in case the two of them couldn't do the dance moves. And they made it their goal to do the whole number by themselves, and they succeeded.
That's determination.
Yeah, that's a pretty physical scene, too.
Oh, yeah.
So the walking piano, by the way, was originally 6.5 feet long and only 1 octave. So the piano was too small to play Heart and Soul. Penny Marshall contacted Remo Saraceni, the creator of the piano, and she said that she needed one built large enough to accommodate the dancing feet of 2 grown men. And then he made a 16-foot-long, full 3-octave piano that was used in the scene.
And even though FAO Schwartz, unfortunately, is closing, but all these years, if you went to the store, you could see that, and you can actually book time to go and play it.
You have to make an appointment, though.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
And I think they charge you, too.
As I've talked about in past podcasts, it's always interesting to hear some of the people that were considered for key roles in movies. This one could have been a very different movie. Tom Hanks was the first choice to play Josh Baskin, but he was unavailable initially because he was working on Dragnet and Punchline. The lead role was offered to Robert De Niro, if you can imagine that.
No, I can't imagine that.
Yeah, he wanted to do it, but he didn't get the part because he wanted too much money. He was asking for $6 million, and it was just too much for the budget. Hanks ended up becoming available, and then he took the role for $2 million. David Moscow was originally cast not as young Josh, but as the character of Billy, his friend, because he didn't look like Robert De Niro. When Tom Hanks was cast, they switched him back to young Josh, David Moscow, and they gave him colored contact lenses so his eye color would match Tom Hanks. The thing about De Niro is that he was such a powerful guy in Hollywood that he helped get the movie made. None of the studios were interested in making the movie until they found out that he was interested in being in it. So even though he didn't end up being in it, that generated interest in the movie for all the other people involved. John Travolta was actually Penny Marshall's first choice to play Josh, but the studio didn't want him. They said, he's box office poison. He's really, his career is on the downturn. It took a couple of years for him to kind of get back into the good graces of Hollywood, but his career started to get back on track the following year in Look Who's Talking.
Every line that they ask him, he'd be looking back at them saying, What?
Vinnie Barbarino.
Right.
So Harrison Ford, Albert Brooks, and Dennis Quaid also turned down the role of Josh. Quaid told Larry King in an interview that he turned it down because he wanted to do Everybody's All-American. That was probably a choice he regretted.
Oh, sure.
And Gary Busey had also auditioned for this movie.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, this was before he was crazy Gary Busey,
Okay.
though.
Deborah Winger was originally considered for the Susan Lawrence role, but she couldn't take the part because she was pregnant at the time, and she was the one who recommended Elizabeth Perkins. And Jared Rushton, who plays Josh's friend Billy Kopecki, was a natural blonde, and they actually had his hair dyed for the film.
The interesting thing about the Elizabeth Perkins role is that it seems like such a throwaway when you compare it to Tom Hanks. But the thing about her role that's kind of cool is that if you watch, you see a transformation happen. She starts out as being this real uptight, hair perfectly coiffed in the business suits and all that kind of stuff, and really like perfectly well kept and everything. And then as the movie progresses and she gets to know Josh and starts getting involved with him romantically, you see her kind of slowly loosen up. Her hair's down,
Right.
and the clothing that she wears is almost kid-like at points, and
Yeah, she's no longer as uptight, and you can kind of see that metamorphosis with her too.
yeah, and Elizabeth Perkins does a great job of playing all the different shades of that character,
Right.
What are some of the other scenes that really stick out for you?
One of my real favorite ones is just go all the way back to the very beginning after Josh turns into this grown-up, and they're trying to figure out, all right, what do they do next? And decides, okay, they're going to lay low. They're going to go to the city for a couple of days until they find this Zoltar machine to make a wish and turn back into a child and go back home. And, the prostitutes say to him, "You looking for some fun tonight, sweet thing?" And he's like, "No, thank you," just like a little boy. And then, the homeless man, "Hey, man, can you spare some change?" And he's like, "No, not really." It's just like the innocence
Right.
is really coming through. And then they find the hotel.
Right.
And it's hysterical because Billy's looking there. He says, "Hey, this looks okay." And, he looks up at the sign of the name of it. It says St. James, and Billy's like, "Yeah, St. James, Josh. It's religious."
Exactly. There's a great scene in that, once they get into the hotel room and stuff, again, that demonstrates Tom Hanks's brilliance as an actor. After Billy leaves and he's there by himself and there's gunshots outside
Right.
and then there's yelling in the hallway and all kinds of stuff going on that, would scare the crap out of any 12-year-old.
Uh-huh.
He curls up on the bed under the covers, kind of in the fetal position, and he just starts crying.
Right.
I mean, it's so believable.
Uh-huh.
It's so like, wow, he's 12 right there. It's
Right.
amazing.
Oh, spot on.
So now, of course, he has to get a job. So he searches the want ads with Billy, and he finds a job at a toy company.
So he's at his desk the first morning, and who's his cubicle mate? Scotty Brennan is his name, played by John Lovitz.
Scene stealer. He's
oh my
awesome.
God. And here he is. He's the guy who's there to teach Josh the ropes on his first day of work. He sees, Josh diligently trying to do everything, and he's like, yelling over the wall, "Hey, listen, what are you trying to do? Get us all fired?" Josh is like, "Huh? Yeah, you got to slow down. Pace yourself. Slowly. Then Scotty, is like pointing out. He says, "Hey, you see that girl over there in the red? Say hi to her, and she's yours. She'll have her legs wrapped around you so tight, you'll be begging for mercy." And then Josh says, "Well, I'll stay away from her then."
One of the other great scenes in the movie is when the company has the party. Tom Hanks shows up in the crazy tuxedo, the white tuxedo with like the trim and stuff. He has one of those little mini corn on the cobs from the salad bar, and he starts eating it like a real corn on the cob.
The baby corn. I do that every time I have a baby corn. It's like classic. My family like cringes because they know, there's baby corn there. Dad's gonna go do his like big
Tom Hanks.
scene here.
Yeah, that was actually improvised by Tom Hanks. That wasn't in the script.
Oh, it was great. That's one of the best.
And then the scene where they're eating the caviar.
Yeah, he has no clue.
Yeah, he puts the caviar in his mouth and then he just starts choking on it.
Right.
He's like. And then Elizabeth Perkins says, "Are you okay? Can I get you something?" And he's like, "Can I have a milkshake or something?"
Yeah. Obviously, he seems out of place there. And then Susan is kind of like, "I got a car downstairs. You want to get out of here?" And he's like, "Yeah, sure." So they go downstairs. They get into this limo. And, she's trying to have a serious conversation in the car about how vulnerable she is.
Right.
And meanwhile, he's sitting there playing with all the buttons and gadgets of the limo. And then they come to Josh's apartment. And
yeah, she's like, "I'd love to see your place."
"Yeah, I'm not so sure we should do this." And, he's like, "Do what?" "Well, I like you and I want you to spend the night with you." And he's like, "You mean sleep over?" And she's like, "Well, yeah." And, he's like,
"I get to be on top."
Right.
Of course, he's talking about bunk beds.
Yeah, right.
So this movie has something in common with 1987's Spaceballs and 1988's Caddyshack 2 and Beetlejuice. Each of them contain the word fuck in a film rated PG during the PG-13 era.
Well, that is interesting. I didn't, I'd have to really watch the film again and figure out where in the world did they do that? Because
Billy says it to him.
Okay.
Billy says "fuck you" to him because he's mad because he's too wrapped up in the job instead of being his friend.
Okay. Yeah, sure. Now I remember that.
Yeah. I like the part of the movie where John Hurd's character, the other executive, where he's trying to get to know him. So he decides he's going to play racquetball with him. And what does Josh say to him?
"Wouldn't you rather play basketball? I'm not very good at sports. I'm much better at video hockey." And Paul starts, "Well, that's not a sport." They get into this whole dialogue. And he starts peppering him with, "What about golf? That's not a sport. You don't sweat. Well, what about if you let some machine do all the work?" And he says, "Well, what about car racing?" He's like, "Shut up, Baskin." So the racquetball scene was funny too. Susan's sort of sensing that Josh isn't telling her everything. And he's like, "Well, I haven't told you something because if I did, I didn't think you'd believe me. And if you did believe me, you wouldn't like me anymore." She's like, "Well, you could tell me everything." He's like, "I'm not who you think I am." So,
"Oh my God, you're married."
Right, exactly. He starts going on. He says, "Before I met you, I was in Little League. And I rode my bike to school and I played with my friends and hung out with them. And I want to go home. I miss my family and I want to go home." And that's the conclusion she draws. I knew this was too good to be true. And he's pleading with, no, I'm not married. And she's like, "You're not?" He says, "No, I'm a child." She's, coming back at him and everything. "Oh, and who is it? You think there isn't a frightened kid inside of me too?"
I like when she's so enamored with him that when he explains the age difference and all that, she's trying to do arithmetic in her head, trying to figure out, "So what are you, 15, 16? And he's like 13. Oh, now, you know? Like she's thinking that maybe there's a chance that in a couple of years they can connect again.
Right. I almost forgot one of the funniest scenes. It's easy to miss it if you're not really paying close attention. It's where Susan's pouring milk into her coffee at breakfast, and she doesn't see the reverse side of the milk carton. Right. Which has a picture of the young Josh and in big letters, missing Joshua Baskin.
Yeah, well, what happened was John Hurd, the other executive, he says to her, you know, where did this guy come from? He had to come from somewhere. You know, he doesn't just pop out of nowhere. You know, and she's, I tried all the other toy companies. Nobody's ever heard of Josh Baskin. And there he is on the milk carton.
Yeah. So just think how all this would play out today. So all this happens, he disappears, he's missing. Okay, number one, the police will be all over this. They'll have, they'll be looking for him. Elizabeth's going to be arrested now, you know, for probably some sort of sexual assault.
Right.
You know?
So, yeah, exactly. She's going to be on To Catch a Predator or something like that. We are living in a much different world than most of these 80s movies.
And that's what I really love about this movie is, you know, every couple of years or whatever, you can flip it on. You could be flipping the channels and you happen to see it. Doesn't matter where you get into it, the beginning, the middle, you know, towards the end. But it's, you know, one of those types of movies where it's a feel-good kind of movie. Yeah. And it kind of takes you back to that time.
Yeah. And that's I think the reason why I enjoy watching all of these older movies, because growing up during that time, things were just a lot easier. There's just too much information nowadays, and most of it's bad. Right. Most of it's negative. You know, that's one of the things about Facebook. I don't go on a lot because it's just every time you go on and you start going through your news feed, it's just one negative thing after another. So it's very frustrating.
Yeah, I feel sorry for some of these kids growing up today because they really don't get to enjoy being a kid.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, like you said earlier, you go back to that time. You and I, you know, we could go out, go down to the schoolyard, playground, play you know, games of pickup basketball, pickup baseball, whatever, with a whole bunch of friends. Now, it's all got to be organized. And you know, once you let the adults involved in it, forget it. You know, they're playing out their egos.
Exactly. You know? And then, like, you get parents that you know, yell at the umpire at the Little League game, or, you know, or yell at the coach for not playing their kid. Or this and that. But
these kids are just out there to have fun, have a good time. Exactly. And this picture really reminds you about going back to that time, to be a kid again, and just kind of seeing the world through their eyes.
There's a great scene in the movie, in fact, where Tom Hanks starts walking through his old neighborhood and he's seeing all the kids playing. I think that's when he sees the kids in the pile of leaves and all that. But he goes to the ball field and two of his Little League teammates are playing a little game of pepper where the one kid's hitting the ball out to the outfield to the other kid. And I think that's when he realizes, I really want to be a kid again. I really miss this, you know?
Right.
You were talking about what it was like when we were growing up. I mean, you know, you probably had an even more different childhood than I did because you grew up in the city.
Right.
I mean, you know, I grew up in the suburbs of New Jersey, and I mean, you know, you literally could ride your bike over to your friend's house, you know, across town or whatever, and you knew you had to be home as it was getting dark.
Right. Or you'd hear your parent yelling from outside the window, time to come home.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, that's real. That was
you
the
went
real
out,
thing.
especially in the summer. You know, you'd get up in the morning, you'd go out, you wouldn't even have time to stop for lunch. You'd be hanging out with your friends, and, you know, you'd come back at dinner time, and that was, you know, the normalcy.
I saw a great thing on Facebook. We talk about all the technology. Nowadays, kids, they don't communicate. Oh, and that's another thing. Sue mentioned this. We're watching the movie, and you know when he's talking on the walkie-talkies with Billy across the way, you know, next door? Like, kids did that. You know, now they text each other. There's no interaction anymore. Like, you know.
You know, the funny thing about that, it brings memories back to me because I just had lunch with one of my best friends from way back, my friend Mark, and we lived in Queens in an apartment building, and he lived in the first floor. I lived on the second floor. There were probably about a dozen apartments on each floor, but we happened to live right above and below one another. So whenever we wanted to talk, he would either bang up on the ceiling or I would knock down on the floor, and we'd open up the window because our bedrooms were in the same position, and we'd just hang out the window and talk up and down. Didn't matter what time of day or whatever.
Kind of like the honeymooners.
Exactly.
Hey, Norton, come down here.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's so different nowadays for kids. And but there was a great thing on Facebook I started to say where it was a picture of a bunch of bikes just piled on top of one another, and the caption was something like, you know, this is how we knew where everybody was in the neighborhood, before text messaging and stuff. It's sad, but that's really gone for kids nowadays.
Yeah, a whole different lifestyle, whole different world we're living in.
Yeah. So did you ever wonder what happened to David Moscow, who played young Josh?
I know he stayed somewhat in acting, but I kind of thought I saw him a few times, but I'm not sure.
Well, he ended up in Newsies with Christian Bale in 1992, and then he was in a movie called Just Married with Ashton Kutcher in 2003, among other films. He still does a little bit of acting, some TV movies, short films, things like that. He was engaged to Kerry Washington, the actress from Scandal, for a few years, 2004 to 2007. He ended up marrying someone else last year, and he also develops mixed-income green buildings in Harlem.
Interesting.
So he's doing stuff that's good for the environment. Very interesting stuff. Yeah, a lot of child actors, some of them do hang around a little bit after they mature. But it's very rare that a child actor, especially one in such an iconic role, goes on to become a big movie star as an adult, too. I think that about wraps up Big. If you have any thoughts or screen facts of your own about Big that you want to share, or if you have any feedback about the podcast in general, please send me an email at screenfacts@yahoo.com. And also, please take some time, if you could, to rate, comment, and subscribe on iTunes. By doing that, you're going to help other people find this podcast, and that's what we're hoping for. Please also check out my website, jasondavisvoice.com/podcast. There's info there about the other places that you can find this podcast, and you can also order a Screen Facts t-shirt if you'd like. Warren, thanks for coming in and talking about Big. This is fun.
Oh, I enjoyed it. Always a pleasure and really enjoyable. Brings me back to these old times and really enjoyed it.
A lot of great movies, and hopefully we assume that most people have seen this movie because it's been around and it's a pretty big hit and all that. But you know what? Maybe people will go and check it out again because they forgot how great it was. It's definitely worth checking out again. Well, thanks for listening. Join me again next Wednesday for more Screen Facts with Jason Davis. Bye-bye.